never thought silence could hurt this much." A crown lies on the cold stone floor of an empty throne room. Dust covers the golden edges, as if the kingdom itself has forgotten its ruler. The Duke stands there, alone. His hands shake slightly as he picks up the crown. And for the first time in his life, power means nothing, because she is gone. "I married her for power." His voice breaks in the empty hall. "But I lost her forever." Duke Alexander was not a man people approached lightly. He was feared across the kingdom, not because he was cruel, but because he was emotionless. He never smiled in court, never laughed at celebrations, never showed mercy or warmth. To him, emotions were dangerous, weakness disguised as beauty, and in a kingdom like his, weakness got you destroyed. Nobles whispered behind closed doors, "He doesn't have a heart. He has only ambition. He will become king one day, and the kingdom will kneel." But Alexander never cared about whispers. He only cared about one thing: power. The kingdom of Valthera was beautiful, but dangerous. Behind its golden walls lay political betrayal, silent wars between noble families, secret alliances made in darkness. The king was growing old, and everyone knew what that meant. A war for the throne was coming. Dukes would rise, families would fall, and only the strongest would survive. Alexander understood this better than anyone, and so he prepared, not with love, not with kindness, but with strategy. Far from the politics of the palace lived a young noblewoman named Valthera. She was not powerful, not feared, not important in the eyes of the court. But she had something rare in Valthera, a pure heart. She spoke gently to servants. She helped those below her status. She believed people could be better than their circumstances. Her mother often warned her, "Kindness does not survive in this kingdom." But Valthera always smiled softly. "I would rather lose in kindness than win in cruelty." Little did she know, her life was about to change forever. One evening, in the Duke's war chamber, maps covered the table. Alliances were falling apart. Enemies were rising. The kingdom was becoming unstable. An advisor spoke carefully. "Your Grace, you need an alliance, a strong one." Silence, then another voice. "The House of Ardent has a daughter, Lady Valthera." A pause. "Marry her, and her family will secure half the northern territories." Alexander finally looked up. A marriage, not love, not choice, a transaction. He didn't hesitate. "Arrange it." That was all he said. No emotion, no curiosity, no idea that this single decision would destroy him. Music fades slightly, emotional tone increases. Because in that moment, he didn't just choose power. He chose a future where he would learn what it meant to lose love. Too late. The next morning, messengers from the Duke's palace arrived at the Ardent estate. Their armor gleamed under the pale sunlight, and the royal crest on their banners made one thing clear. This was not a request, it was a decision. Inside the grand hall, Lady Valthera's father held the sealed letter in his hands. His expression shifted as he read. First surprise, then disbelief, and finally, relief. He looked toward his wife. No words were spoken, but everything was understood. "Valthera," he called. She entered the hall quietly, graceful, calm, unaware that her life was about to change forever. "My child," her father began slowly, "the Duke has chosen you." A pause. "Valthera, he wishes to marry you." For a moment, the world went silent. "The Duke," she whispered softly. Her fingers tightened slightly around her dress. "But why me?" Her mother stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It is an honor. she said with a soft smile. A great honor. But Alara wasn't looking at her mother. She was looking at her father, searching, hoping for something real. Instead, she saw ambition. You will become Duchess of Valthera, her father continued. Our family will be protected, powerful, respected. Alara swallowed slowly. And what about love? She asked quietly. Silence. Her father's voice hardened slightly. Love is not what builds kingdoms. That was the moment she understood. This was not a choice. It was her fate. I understand, she said softly. And just like that, her future was decided, not by her heart, but by power. Back at the palace, Duke Alexander stood by the window of his war chamber. Rain tapped softly against the glass, cold, distant, unfeeling, just like him. The ardent family has accepted, his advisor said. Alexander nodded once. Good. A pause. Then the advisor spoke again, carefully. Your Grace, would you like to meet Lady Alara before the wedding? Silence. No. The answer came without hesitation, without curiosity, without thought. It does not matter who she is, Alexander continued. She is not my wife. She is an alliance. The advisor lowered his head. As you wish, Your Grace. But as he turned to leave, he hesitated. And, Your Grace. Alexander didn't move. Marriage sometimes changes things. A long pause. It won't change me. The room fell silent again, because Duke Alexander had already made one thing clear. He would marry her, but he would never love her. That night, Alara stood alone on her balcony. The moonlight touched her face gently, but her heart felt heavy. A stranger, she whispered. I am going to marry a stranger. She had heard stories about the Duke, stories that made people lower their voices when they spoke. They said he was cold, unforgiving, untouchable. Some even said he didn't know how to love. Alara closed her eyes. A small breath escaped her lips. What kind of life awaits me in that palace? For the first time, fear crept into her heart, but she pushed it away, because she had been raised to be strong, to endure, to survive, even if it meant loving someone who might never love her back. A few days later, the two families gathered for a formal dinner, a tradition before royal unions. The hall was filled with nobles. Whispers echoed through the air, curiosity, judgment, expectation. And then he entered, Duke Alexander. The room fell silent, not by command, but by presence. He didn't look around, didn't acknowledge the crowd, didn't smile. He simply walked to his seat, as if the world itself moved around him. Alara felt it immediately, his presence. She hadn't even looked at him yet, but she could feel the distance, the cold, the weight of the man she was about to marry. Slowly, she lifted her eyes, and for the first time, she saw him, tall, composed, untouchable. And yet, there was something else, something hidden, something broken. Their eyes met for only a second, but it felt longer. And then, he looked away, as if she didn't matter. After the dinner, tradition required one thing, a private meeting. Alara was escorted to a quiet room inside the palace. Her heart beat faster with every step. The door opened. He was already inside, standing near the fireplace. He didn't turn around. Alara stepped in slowly. Your Grace, she said softly, bowing. Silence, then his voice, deep, calm, cold. You are Lady Alara. Yes, Your Grace. A pause, he turned slightly, not fully, just enough to acknowledge her presence. From today, he said, you will follow the rules of this house. You will do your duty as my future wife. Alara swallowed. I understand. Another pause, then he spoke again. Do not expect affection. Do not expect kindness. And do not expect love. The words were sharp, clear, unapologetic. For a moment, Ilara's heart sank, but she didn't show it. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly. I do not expect anything, Your Grace. I will simply do my duty. For the first time, he looked at her properly, really looked at her, and for a brief moment, something shifted, but just as quickly, it disappeared. Good, he said. And just like that, their marriage was sealed. Not with love, not with hope, but with silence. The day of the wedding arrived. The palace had never looked more magnificent. Golden banners flowed from towering walls. Nobles from every corner of the kingdom gathered. Whispers filled the air, not of love, but of power. Ilara of House Ardent will become Duchess today. A strategic alliance, a perfect move by the Duke. But no one spoke of what mattered most, her heart. Ilara stood at the end of the grand aisle. Her gown shimmered like starlight. Her hands were steady, but inside, a storm was rising. At the other end stood Duke Alexander, unmoving, unfeeling.
His expression did not change as she walked toward him. Not admiration, not curiosity, not even acknowledgement, just silence. When she reached him, their eyes met briefly, but there was no warmth, only distance. The vows were spoken, cold, formal, empty. I do. Two simple words, spoken without meaning. The crown was placed upon her head, and just like that, Ilara became Duchess of Valthera. But not his wife. The celebrations lasted for hours. Laughter echoed through the halls. Music filled the air, but not for them. The Duke disappeared shortly after the ceremony. No dance, no conversation, no moment shared. Ilara remained behind, smiling politely at strangers, answering questions she barely heard. Where is his grace? Surely he will return. But he didn't. That night, Ilara was led to her chambers, alone. She sat on the edge of the grand bed, still in her wedding gown, waiting. Minutes passed, then hours, but the door never opened, because the Duke never came. In another part of the palace, Duke Alexander stood by the window once again, looking out into the darkness. He knew where he was supposed to be. He knew what tonight meant, but he didn't move, because to him, this marriage was complete. The alliance was secured, the objective achieved. There was nothing more to give. Meanwhile, Ilara's eyes slowly filled with tears. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet heartbreak, because deep down, she had hoped, even just a little, that he would come, that he would try, that maybe. There was something human beneath all that coldness, but that hope began to fade. And in its place came understanding. She was alone. Days turned into weeks, and nothing changed. The Duke remained distant, focused only on his duties, his power, his strategy. Ilara existed in the same palace, but in a completely different world. They rarely spoke, rarely crossed paths, and when they did, it was brief, formal, distant. Your Grace? Duchess? Nothing more. But Ilara refused to break. Instead, she adapted. She learned the routines of the palace. She spoke kindly to the servants. She brought warmth to a place that had forgotten it. And slowly, people began to notice. The servants smiled more. The halls felt less empty. Even the air seemed lighter, all because of her. Ilara didn't demand respect. She earned it. She listened. She cared. She made people feel seen, something the Duke had never done. And though he never acknowledged it, he noticed from a distance. He saw how people spoke differently around her, how they relaxed, how they smiled. It was unfamiliar, strange, but he didn't question it, because questioning it meant feeling something, and he refused to do that. One evening, Ilara waited in the dining hall. The table was set. Candles flickered softly. She had asked the Duke to join her just once. Not as a ruler, not as an alliance, but as her husband. Minutes passed. Then the doors opened. He entered. Ilara's eyes lifted slightly. A small, hopeful smile touched her lips, but it didn't last. Because he didn't sit. "I don't have time for this," he said calmly. The words were simple, but they cut deep. Ilara stood slowly. "I thought we could share a meal, silence, then I have more important matters." The hope in her eyes faded, but she didn't argue. She simply nodded. "I understand." And just like that, something inside her shifted. Not completely, not yet, but enough for the first crack to form, because even the strongest heart cannot stay whole forever. The palace had changed, not visibly, not in ways the court could openly speak of, but something was different. The warmth Ilara once carried was fading. She still smiled, still spoke kindly, still fulfilled her duties as Duchess, but something inside her had grown quiet. The laughter that once echoed softly through the halls was gone, and though no one dared say it aloud, they all felt it, even him. Duke Alexander stood once again at the edge of the grand corridor, watching. She walked past him without stopping, without looking, without speaking. "Duchess," he said calmly. She paused, turned slightly. "Your Grace!" Her voice was polite, perfect, unshaken, but empty. For a moment, he said nothing, because something about it felt wrong. But instead of questioning it, he turned away. And so did she. Two people, standing in the same world, living in completely different ones. Whispers began to spread through the court. The Duke and Duchess, they are never seen together. Is the marriage failing? Perhaps it was never real to begin with. And where whispers grow, so does opportunity. Lady Seraphine, beautiful, clever, ambitious. She had always admired power, and Duke Alexander was power. She saw the distance, she saw the silence, and she saw her chance. One evening, during a royal gathering, she approached him. "Your Grace," she said softly, curtsying. Alexander acknowledged her with a slight nod. "I've noticed," she continued gently, "you spend much of your time alone." Silence. "Power can be isolating," she added. He didn't respond. But he didn't walk away either, and that was enough. From across the hall, Ilara saw them. Not the words, not the conversation, just the image. Another woman, standing where she never had the chance to stand. And for a brief moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not jealousy, but realization. She had never truly belonged there. The next morning, rumors had already taken shape. The Duke prefers Lady Seraphine. They are often seen speaking. Perhaps the Duchess has lost his interest. Ilara heard them, every word, but she said nothing, because what could she say? That her husband had never chosen her, that she had lost something she never truly had? Meanwhile, the Duke began to notice something else. Distance, but not just from him, from everything. Ilara had withdrawn. She no longer waited, no longer asked, no longer tried. And for reasons he couldn't explain, that unsettled him. One evening, he found her in the garden, alone. The wind moved gently through the trees, but the air between them felt heavy. "You've been distant," he said. Ilara turned slowly.
What would you have me do?
"Have I?" She replied calmly. "Yes." Then she spoke, softly. "I thought that's what you preferred." The words were simple, but they carried weight. He frowned slightly. "I did not ask for silence." Ilara held his gaze, for the first time, without softness. "No," she said quietly, "you asked for nothing." Silence fell between them. For a moment, it felt like something might break, but instead, he turned away, and she let him, because neither of them knew how to fix something that had never been built. That night, Ilara sat by her window once again, but this time, she wasn't hoping, she wasn't waiting, she wasn't wondering if he would ever love her, because she already knew the answer, and somewhere deep inside her heart, something quietly began to close, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in acceptance. And sometimes, acceptance is far more dangerous than pain, because once a heart accepts its loneliness, it stops trying to be loved. Something had changed. Duke Alexander felt it, even before he understood it. The palace was quieter now, not the kind of silence he was used to, not the cold, controlled stillness he preferred. This silence felt empty. He walked through the corridors. Servants bowed as always. The walls stood tall as always. Everything was exactly as it had been. And yet, something was missing. He didn't know when it began, but he noticed it in the smallest ways. No soft laughter in the distance, no gentle voice speaking to the servants, no quiet presence waiting in the dining hall. Ilara, she was still there, but not in the way she used to be, and for the first time, he felt it. Not as a thought, not as a strategy, but as something deeper, absence. It began with the memories, unwanted, uninvited, the way she used to wait at the table, the way she spoke, gently, even when ignored, the way she looked at him, as if he was more than just a title. He had never asked for those moments, he had never valued them, but now, they refused to leave him. One evening, he passed through the servants' hall, and he heard them speaking. "The Duchess hasn't visited in days. She used to come every morning. She used to ask about our families. Used to." The word lingered. Alexander paused, for reasons he couldn't explain. It unsettled him. He found her in the library, sitting quietly, a book open in her hands. But she wasn't reading. She was simply there, still, distant. "Ilara?" Her name left his lips before he could stop it. She looked up, calm, composed. "Yes, Your Grace." That formality again, that distance, it irritated him more than it should have. "You haven't been present," he said, a strange choice of words, even to him. She closed the book gently. "I have fulfilled my duties." "That is not what I meant." Silence, then. "What did you mean?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer, because he didn't know. Not yet. That night, he couldn't sleep. Something restless moved inside him. Not anger, not ambition, something unfamiliar. Something he had avoided his entire life. He stood by the window, as he always did. But this time, his thoughts were not about war, not about power, not about control. They were about her, and that alone was enough to disturb him. "When did this begin?" he whispered, but there was no answer. Because feelings don't announce themselves. They grow quietly, and by the time you notice them, it is often too late. The next morning,
he saw her again, in the courtyard. A servant had stumbled, dropping a tray. Without hesitation, Ilara knelt beside her, helping, comforting, smiling gently, the same way she always had. But something about it felt different now, because this time he saw it, not as background, not as something insignificant, but as something rare, something he didn't have, something he had never given. And suddenly it became clear, painfully clear, he didn't just notice her, he missed her, not her presence, her heart. And in that moment, Duke Alexander realised something that shook him to his core. He had fallen in love with his wife, the woman he had ignored, the woman he had pushed away, the woman who had once chosen him, without hesitation, but now, yet she no longer did, and that realization came far too late. For the first time in his life, Duke Alexander hesitated, not on a battlefield, not in court, not in matters of power, but in something far more unfamiliar, his own heart. He stood outside her chamber door, his hand hovered in the air, uncertain. He had faced kings without fear, destroyed rivals without hesitation, and yet, this simple moment felt heavier than anything he had ever known, because this time he had something to lose. Slowly, he knocked. "Come in," her voice answered. He entered. Elara stood by the window, as she had so many nights before, but something was different. She didn't turn immediately, didn't rush, didn't hope, just waited. "Elara," he said quietly. She turned slowly. "Yes, Your Grace." That distance again, but this time, he felt it. "I need to speak with you." A pause. "You may speak." Her tone was calm, polite, but not warm. For the first time, he struggled to find words. He began, then stopped. "Because how do you say something you've spent your entire life avoiding? I have been wrong." The words felt unfamiliar, heavy. Elara said nothing, so he continued. "I did not see you. I did not understand you. I thought this marriage was nothing more than duty, a breath. But I was wrong." Silence filled the room. Then finally, he said the words he never thought he would. "I care for you." Then more quietly, "No, He closed his eyes briefly. "I love you." The room stood still. Time itself seemed to pause, because this was the moment everything could change. Elara looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time in a long time, and in her eyes there was no anger, no hatred, only something far more painful. Sadness. "You love me?" she repeated softly, not as a question, but as something she was trying to understand. A long silence followed. Then she took a small step forward. "I waited for those words." Her voice trembled, just slightly. "I waited when you ignored me. I waited when you pushed me away. I waited when you made me feel invisible." Each word landed heavier than the last. "And now," she continued quietly, "you say them as if they were always yours to give." Alexander stepped forward. "Elara, I didn't understand before." "No," she interrupted softly. "You didn't." Silence. Then, the truth. "I loved you." The words broke something inside him. "I loved you when you gave me nothing. I chose you, even when you never chose me." A tear slipped quietly down her cheek. "But love," she whispered, "cannot survive alone." Alexander's voice softened. "Then choose me now." The words came out almost desperate, but Elara shook her head gently. "You don't understand." She stepped back. "I wanted to be chosen then." A pause. "When it mattered." Silence filled the space between them, and in that silence, everything ended. "Yet I can't stay here," she said quietly. His heart dropped. "Elara, I cannot remain in a place where I was never truly seen." Her voice was steady now, strong, not broken. "I deserve more than being loved too late." Those words cut deeper than any blade. That night, Elara left the palace. No grand announcement, no dramatic exit, just quiet footsteps, fading into the darkness. By the time Alexander realized, it was already too late. "Find her," he ordered. But something inside him already knew. This wasn't something power could fix. This wasn't something authority could command. Because love, when lost this way, does not return. And as the gates of the palace closed behind her, Duke Alexander stood there, for the first time in his life, helpless. Because the one thing he finally wanted was the one thing he could never have again. Love too late. The palace had never been louder, and yet it had never felt so empty. Servants moved quietly through the halls. Nobles still gathered. The court still functioned. Everything continued. But something vital was gone, her presence. Duke Alexander walked through the corridors alone. No one dared speak.
No one dared ask, because they could see it. The change. Not in his title, not in his power, but in his silence. It was no longer cold, it was broken. Every corner of the palace reminded him of her. The dining hall, where she once waited. The gardens, where she once stood alone. The library, where she sat in silence. Places he had passed countless times before, without a second thought. Now, each one felt heavy. Because now, he saw them. The moments he had ignored, the love he had overlooked, and the woman he had lost. The throne room stood grand as ever. The crown rested on its pedestal. Power, authority, control. Everything he had ever worked for. Everything he had chosen. And yet, none of it mattered. Alexander approached the throne slowly. He picked up the crown, held it in his hands. Once, it had meant everything. Now, it felt heavy. Not with power, but with regret. I had everything, he whispered. His voice echoed through the empty hall. And I lost the only thing that mattered. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. But she never returned. No message. No sign, no trace. She had truly let go. And that was the hardest truth of all. Because deep down, he knew. Even if he found her, even if he begged, it wouldn't change anything. Because love given too late is often love lost forever. I thought power was everything. I thought love was weakness. I thought I had time. A long pause. But I was wrong. His voice softens, almost breaking. Because the greatest loss is not losing a kingdom. It is losing the one person who made it worth ruling. The crown slipped slightly in his hand. And for the first time, Duke Alexander does not look like a ruler. He looks like a man who learned too late what it means to love. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the Duke's Love Tales, so you'll be the first to know when the next story begins. Because in this world, love is powerful, but timing is everything.